We open up the mailbag to answer questions about a potential starting lineup and Miami's plan for backup center before we look at one of the top shooters in NBA history and his improbable career with the Heat on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is closer than you think, and right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your first bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets. Download the FanDuel app to get started. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Real GM Radio, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. David, did you see the Heat's social media account ask the players how many days they would go without showering if they got paid $100,000 for each day that they went without a shower?
Oh, wow. I did not, but I imagine that's a pretty extensive number there that they gave.
Well, they had pulled the bunch, like Vlad Goldin, some of the training camp guys. So that number is going to be a little bit higher than maybe somebody like Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo who've cashed in and have an appearance to consider, right? But Drew Smith said he'd go 10 days. He said, I'd cash in the cool million and then take my shower. But
wow,
that's big podcaster money, though.
Yeah, this might just be my month. I just don't. I might not see the inside of a shower throughout all of September, and that's fine with me. If I get $100,000 a day for the rest of it, yeah, I think.
Could I jump in a pool?
No, that's
cheating.
Imagine the chlorine probably works some kind of way. That's not a full bath. You know what? That would have been an interesting question for Roni Turiaf, who legendarily was not much in terms of hygiene. At least that's the rumor at some point.
About a year ago, I went about 3 straight days during a bachelor party in Costa Rica without a shower. Now there was pool time in the middle, so I think that. But after those 3 days, it was tough. That was tough for me. I don't know how much. It's a lot of money, but I really don't know how much longer I can go than that.
I've been camping before for a couple of days, and those were some primitive campgrounds there. So
you're jumping in the lake.
No, there was no lake
nothing
jumping.
Like that. Okay.
No, that was just being out in nature, camping.
You might.
It
was
cool, so yeah. Not proud of it, but you know what?
Hey, get that money, man. Yeah, I'm not judging.
That's right.
We're going to open up the mailbag before we jump into our 25 of 25 series with a look at a fan favorite who turned to fan enemy, who turned back to a fan favorite, and who knows what he is at this point. But let's jump into the mailbag really quick with this question from Malachi, who writes in, how would you all feel if the Miami Heat started Davion Mitchell, Tyler Hero, Norm Powell, Nikola Jovic, and Bam? You'd have Jaime, Wiggins, Larson, and Ware as your main guys off the bench. So 3 ball handlers with Davion, Tyler Hero, and Norm Powell. A little bit small on the perimeter, but 3 ball handlers out there. Davion Mitchell, you have him for defense. And then you've got Nico starting at that power forward spot, and we're back to Bam at center. This, to me, is a fast lineup. I don't know that Miami wants to start it. I do know I want to see it.
Yep. I like that idea. I think that's exactly right. I think this is a unit that we'll see roll out at some point throughout the season, and it's going to be interesting to see, like you said, the pace at which they play. Because I think Bam is going to be, if for no other reason than just because the roster is so limited in that regard, he's going to play center at some spots. But doing so as the full-time starter, that ship has sailed. I don't think he'll ever return to that. I don't think he ever wanted to be that in the first place. And it was just basically him trying to carve out some kind of role early in his career. And he kind of stuck that way. At least he was able to play with another 7-footer in Myers Leonard during that first year in which he was a full-time starter. But I think, again, he does not want to do that. And now that you've got a legitimate 7-footer out on the floor right now with Kel'el Ware, he's going to continue to be the starter. So I think that's going to be a completely different lineup. We've talked about what that potential starting lineup is. This Malachi suggestion, that's a really fun, fast lineup, and I could see a lot of offense coming from there, especially if Mitchell is able to contribute the same kind of shooting or similar shooting numbers that he did last season, because then you've got really a 5-out offense. And again, very fast, very up-tempo. It's going to be really interesting to see if Spo does eventually utilize something like this.
This could be the second lineup, like the first after subs. Kel'el Ware comes out, Jovic comes in, maybe Wiggins comes out, Mitchell comes in. I think most of us imagine that Spo will split up Tyler Hero and Norm Powell, but maybe he doesn't, right? We have really no idea what he's going to do. This is also really close to what I think is the projected closing lineup, but I would put Wiggins in the Jovic spot. But hey, if Nico makes a Eurobasket leap and looks great in training, it's not out of the question that Nico can end up
It's the
closing games over
defense.
Wiggins. Yeah, it's the
It's the
defense that
defense,
you
right?
want from Wiggins, and that's what you have to see from Nico in terms of a leap.
Yeah, I agree. He has to be a little bit better in that regard, and I think he will be. I mean, we've seen improvement from him. There were games last season where he was pulling down rebounds, swatting shots, and things of that sort. And I think, he's still going to have his mismatches every once in a while. But I think if he continues to develop, this training camp is so crucial in that regard because he really needs to be able to put some numbers up and show that he can hold his own defensively. And I think he's got the added heft that allows him to do that.
Let's get to our next mailbag question. This comes from Flavio, who writes in, if we need to give Vlad Goldin a common contract so we could play all the games in the playoffs, is it possible without going into the tax? Right now, no. But they could play him on this two-way, let him max out all of his games, and then halfway through the season, where we start working with prorated contracts,
Right.
Miami could bring him up, and this would be probably December, January, where they would bring him up. He probably wouldn't even max out all of his games by then. That's probably closer to end of January, February. But he could, theoretically, Miami could do nothing at that spot, just play Goldin as much as they want off this as a two-way guy. And then once
Right.
he sort of maxes out that his run as a two-way guy, which is 50 games, he could then be promoted to the regular roster on a prorated contract. So they could do this. Now, the question is whether or not this is the plan or not.
Right. And that depends on Golden. I mean, he has to emerge as the kind of player who's earned that sort of contract. And we've seen this before throughout the team's history. So it's not something that they're unwilling to do, but they're also under no requirement to extend that standard contract to him sooner than they have to. They can continue to pay him two-way money until he uses up all those games, as he said, and then say, you know what, we want to make good by you. Here's a standard contract for the rest of the season. And I'm sure Golden would be fine with that. I mean, there was no guarantee that he would get a standard contract anywhere else. He just has to play up to the point where he deserves it and earned it. And then the team will reward him because they have in the past. They've seen guys like Drew Smith and others. And I think as long as he can play well and he has earned a spot in the rotation, they'll take care of him. They always do.
Mm-hmm. Whether or not this is the plan, look, it seems like it is right now, like they need to have a backup. Somebody's going to have to play backup minutes, right? And I know that they're going to split Bam and Ware as much as they can, right? They're going to stagger their minutes. One of them is always going to be on the court. Even, we expect them to start. When Ware comes off, Bam will just slide down to the 5 and you just sort of toggle between those two guys. But at some point, there's going to be an injury, foul trouble, something that is going to mean that somebody else is going to have to play some minutes at center. I don't think that that's the vision for Nico right now, despite some of the scuttle around Heat fans right now. I think they will play Goldin. And look, this is a 5-year player. This isn't just any kind of rookie. Now, he was undrafted, all these things. I don't know how good he is. His summer league even in Las Vegas was pretty up and down, but he was a 5-year player in Vegas, in college. He played 154 games, over 3,000 minutes in college, did play in the Big Ten last year after 3 years at FAU. So Miami knows him because he was down the street. He's 24 years old, which is a year older than Alperen Şengün. I'm not saying he's better than Alperen Şengün. I'm just saying this is a guy that has he's got some basketball experience. He's 7'1", 240 pounds. Like, he's got an NBA body right now. And through training camp and all these things, he'll get in Miami Heat shape. Right? The conditioning will get there sooner rather than later, probably. So we'll see what happens. Adam writes in, do you guys see Miami waiving Terry Rozier, dangling a first-round pick to get rid of his contract? We've talked about this. We've done whole episodes on this, so go back if you want a deeper dive on it. But the short answer is no.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like there's any point to it. I think they've learned their lesson about the contract situation. To include a first-round pick in order to acquire a player that they view as somebody who can be a key contributor, especially when they acquired Rozier for what they thought was going to be an extended playoff run. Maybe, did it turn out to be a terrible decision? Sure, in hindsight. But at the time, we were like, you know what? It's totally fine for a guy who can shoot 40% and be a 20-point per game score. Little did we know. At the same time, no, they're not going to do that just to get rid of his contract. I would expect them to keep him until the trade deadline, at which point he becomes a value to some other team who's looking to move a player and will be willing to take on an expiring contract for some free agency plans, or they just might eat the rest of the contract if Terry winds up performing to expectations. So that could happen, however unlikely that might be.
using a first-round pick to acquire Terry Rozier, and then him being on an expiring contract and being under the salary cap tax, and then using another first-round pick to get off of him, just to get off of him when that contract comes off the books in a few months anyway. That's what we call in the game poor asset management.
Yeah.
I don't see the Heat doing that. We've been on top of that this whole time. A couple more questions for Locked Off Heat coming up next. Plus, our 25 of 25 series continues.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You'll love using FanDuel. It fits however you want to make a bet, whether it's a player prop or building a same-game parlay or even jumping in live as the action unfolds, and it makes every game exciting. Whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, it's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays, your Thursdays. Whenever NFL games are playing, you'll be more excited than ever to watch those games because of FanDuel. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. A couple of questions for Locked Off Heat before we get into our 25 of 25 series. This question comes from Cody, who writes in, speaking of the NFL season, who are your top 3 quarterbacks of all time? Are we obligated to put Dan Marino on this list?
Yeah, I kind of think so. Look, I wasn't even a huge football fan at the time, but even I couldn't ignore Marino's greatness. And it just, he's kind of got lost as another one of those guys that just never won a Super Bowl. And while I think that kind of ring culture is a little bit more prevalent in the NBA than it is in the NFL, I think he's widely recognized as the best quarterback to never have won the big one. And yet he was so good in his prime. Like, there were glaring holes, but it just felt like they could never assemble a team that could complement them. They never had either the running game or the defense to really support him in his efforts. And it was just unfortunate that they couldn't really field a team that they needed in order to win.
It was one of those timeline things too, because Marino, if he doesn't retire for a couple more years, that defense starts to come along. Yep. Right, you finally get like Zach Thomas and Jason Taylor and some of these guys. Oh wow, we kind of all of a sudden had a really great defense all of a sudden. And the offensive line kind of shaped up a couple of years after he retired. I know the offensive line was a little
Fielder era.
Oh,
Jay Fielder era. Yeah, exactly.
Jay Fielder era is a big time era. That is formative in my life. So Cody asked top 3, and I'm sorry, I can't put him in my top 3. I can't.
Oh wow.
Top 5. Definitely.
Okay.
Top 3?
Who's top 3 then?
Brady has to be number 1, as much as it pains me. You can't put anybody else there. You got to put Tom Brady there.
I guess. So.
And then I've got Joe Montana. I've got Peyton Manning. Those guys won. They have rings. Manning's stats are right there with Marino's, and he's got 2 championships. I don't know how you put Marino ahead of them.
That's not his fault. I mean, I think there were games there that were like, he was putting up 45 points almost single-handedly.
I know, but so was Peyton. Peyton was Marino with the championships. I know it wasn't his fault, but like, we're splitting hairs here. Again, if this was a top 4 even, I might have Marino in there. I couldn't, if I'm being honest, you can't put him in front of those guys.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know that you have a Peyton Manning without a Dan Marino, though. Like
that's true. That guy, that's for sure. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
He's such a slinger he was. Like, this is unbelievable.
Fastest release of all time.
Oh,
there's no, you could argue there's no modern NFL passing game without Marino, right? You've got like Dan Fouts and the Chargers kind of started it with the vertical threat. And then Marino was just like, all right, cool. I can do this better than anybody else has ever done this in human history. And then everybody was sort of like, this is really awesome. We kind of want,
you know how you watch footage of like older games and you're like, yeah, I mean, that's good stuff, but you know, like NBA games, older NBA games, and it's like, you know what, but they're playing like half speed in comparison to today's game. Not Marino highlights. Those just live up. Those stand the test of time.
It would be like putting Giannis in the 50s and just being like, see, isn't this crazy?
Good luck, Bob Cousy.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah. Last one here before we get into our 25 of 25. Jonah asked me, and I'm sorry, Jonah, I've been putting this off for a really long time. You have to Forgive me. I had a baby and things got kind of crazy. He asked me
boy.
to rank my Tyler, the Creator
Selfish.
albums after I had mentioned Tyler, the Creator after his Don't Tap the Glass album recently came out. So I've got my rankings here, and this is full disclosure right now. And I have every right to change this tomorrow. This is just how I feel right now. To me, Tyler has two classic albums. It's Igor and Flower Boy. Those are the two classic albums. You could argue maybe Call Me If You Get Lost. To me, I just think Igor, Flower Boy, there's no fat on those albums, where Call Me If You Get Lost, maybe a little bit of fat on that album. But Call Me If You Got Lost is in that next tier, along with Wolf, Chromacopia, and Don't Tap the Glass. Those are just return all the time tiers, right? Like there's some songs on those albums that I don't care for. There's a lot of songs on those albums that are some of my favorite Tyler, the Creator albums of all time. Wolf was particularly formative for me when I was in college, so that one's always going to be high. Really got close to putting Wolf in my classic tier. Wouldn't argue with anybody that put it there too. And then kind of the Tyler, the Creator figuring it out, growing pains tier, where he's like kind of experimenting with new sounds and stuff. Cherry Bomb, Goblin, and Bastard are those three albums. So yeah, that's the ranking. I could do a more in-depth thing, but I don't know that anybody cares to hear about it more than Jonah. So that's where we're at.
You know what? I've been doing this for a long time. No one's asked me my top Fish albums. Like, what's going on there? I know
somebody's got to ask him. Somebody's got to ask David. All right. 25 of 25. It's our series looking back at the top 25 Heat players of the last 25 seasons. Every episode, we'll be taking an in-depth look at every player who made the list, as voted on by us and our Locked On Heat insider community, through the lens of what made them a definitive part of the franchise's history. On our last episode, Hassan Whiteside checked in at number 14. Today, at number 13. He's a man who found national relevance and an imposter syndrome in the bubble. The Wall Street Journal once called him the most improbable player in the NBA. He's the host of The Long Shot and the Heat's all-time leader in three-pointers made. It is Duncan Robinson.
Tremendous career. Robinson went undrafted in 2018 after his college career ended. Although he played a short stint at the University of Michigan, but then the Heat saw his work ethic and shooting during a pre-draft workout and were impressed enough to extend an invitation to join their summer league squad. Robinson waffled between joining the Heat or Lakers, ultimately choosing Miami based on their reputation for developing players. Robinson signed a two-way contract in July, but spent most of that year playing in the G League before joining the team for a brief stint at the end of the season, where he struggled to make a shot. Nobody remembers those 15 games he appeared in during Dwayne's Last Dance season. He went a horrific 10 of 35 from three-point range. Ouch. Robinson did eventually sign a standard contract after the season and put in the work during the offseason. Following Miami's acquisition of Jimmy Butler, he emerged as a starter during the 2019-20 season. That season, Duncan shot a blistering 44.6% from three and was a starter during Miami's run through the Orlando bubble all the way to the finals. Robinson continued as a starter during the 2020-21 season, and although his numbers dipped somewhat, he had quickly emerged as one of the best shooters in the NBA. Robinson became a free agent in 2021 and was viewed as an interesting test subject for free agency. While obviously prolific, there were holes in his game, and he was largely a one-dimensional player, albeit one that provided a huge boost to Miami's offense with his shooting and spacing. Ultimately, he was rewarded with a 5-year, $90 million deal that was viewed simultaneously as a bargain and an overpay. Robinson remained a starter for most of the season, but he was hardly as effective as he had once been. His shooting from three dropped to just 37%, and he occasionally looked timid out on the floor. Many believe the pressure of the contract was getting to him, while others thought his game had simply too limited and had been figured out by the rest of the league. Ultimately, he lost his starting role and played as a reserve through Miami's playoff run to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2022. The 22-23 season was even worse for Duncan, as he shot just 33% from behind the arc, remaining a reserve player in 41 of his 42 appearances that season. And then the team went on to an improbable run to the finals, where Duncan actually acquitted himself nicely, shooting over 44% from three that postseason, coming up big with some big-time shots during Miami's incredible run to the NBA Finals for facing the Denver Nuggets. The following two seasons, however, were almost carbon copies of one another. Duncan played in most of the team's game and was a sometime starter, always available to do what he does best. He added some flashes to his game by incorporating a really solid floater, and he showed some solid playmaking skills as well. And while he was an overall poor defender, he was not nearly as foul prone as he had been earlier in his career. This past offseason, with the fifth and final year of his contract just partially guaranteed by the team, Duncan opted out of his deal and became a free agent, and was eventually signed and traded to the Detroit Pistons. Robinson finished one of the most successful stints in team history, holding several records for his three-point shooting and becoming almost synonymous with a team's propensity to develop undrafted players and turn them into solid contributors.
From a personal standpoint, Duncan was one of my favorite players to
All
cover,
time.
not just because he
All
was always
time.
great to talk with in the locker room, but the story is incredible, right? I mean, what he was able to carve out in terms of a career that is ongoing, but obviously over in Miami,
Yeah.
was incredible. And he endeared himself to Miami fans. I think, yes, despite the up and down nature of his career, I think he leaves on a high note. And I think most Heat fans have nothing but good things to say about Duncan Robinson, despite the contract, despite the shooting slumps, despite all that stuff. It was a ridiculously successful tenure. And I think even on the court, this team is going to miss his three-point shooting, something you've talked about quite a bit. But if you look at the rankings, I do think it reflects, again, how Heat fans will ultimately feel about Duncan Robinson. And I think he's somebody that's going to age better as Heat fans sort of age and remember his tenure in Miami, just because of how big of a role he played on these teams and his personality and the way that, again, he endeared himself to fans. But the highest he was ranked was 13. The highest he was ranked by any of our voters, not including you and I, was 13. The lowest was 24. I had him at 13. You had him at 11. So, again, we're right there in terms of fringe top 10 guy among all of the players who played for the Heat over the last 25 seasons. That is high praise for a guy who made a pretty big impact, not just on the Miami Heat in terms of the record books and the production that he had, but players who also came through Miami, whether it was Max Strus or players who didn't necessarily, like a Cole Swider, who tried to be the next Duncan Robinson, but didn't necessarily work out. But a lot of guys pointed to Duncan Robinson as a success story and something that they wanted to emulate. We'll talk more about Duncan Robinson's time, including with trivia and our sliding doors moment for Duncan after this. Were you surprised to see Duncan ranked this high in terms of our overall final ranking with the aggregate of all the average? You had him at 11. Nobody ranked him higher than you did.
I can't say yes because I know exactly how vital he was to the team. But and that being the case, I've got to say I disagree with how I think fans will view him. Like your point
Hmm.
earlier, I echo all of the off the court stuff. I remember talking to him during the Orlando bubble, taking the time to jump on the podcast and for one of his first early appearances on the podcast, right after Ramona Shelburne wrote that incredible profile on him for ESPN when most people were just starting to figure out who the heck a Duncan Robinson even was. And it was just he was so great to talk to, and he's always been that way with us. He's always been very, very just
No
genial
player
and
has appeared on Locked On Heat more than Duncan Robinson.
oh,
I'm pretty
and
sure we have that. I'm pretty sure I have that right.
at least 5 appearances that I can think of.
Yes. Several sit
At
downs
least.
in season at the Heat Arena. Always talked with us at Media Day
Yes.
and was always very generous with his time. So I don't think that anybody's ever appeared. Caleb Martin might be a second,
Probably.
but Duncan was definitely number one.
And he's just great, just always great to see him. But I disagree because I think like the fans don't know that side of him. They don't. They just hear him talk occasionally when he's doing a post game interview, but I don't think they really know that. I mean, if they
Really?
would, if they yeah, I don't think so. I don't think fans see Duncan that way. I at least not in
Huh.
my opinion. They don't
He's got
know
the
that he's that kind.
podcast. He's always very
Again,
generous with the post game interviews.
you have to be a very niche fan that listens to both our podcast, watch the games, and the long shot, and all those things that he's a part of.
Hmm.
I don't think that's the general public. I think most people go, let me slip into my Jose from Kendall role for a little bit and say, oh, that Duncan Robinson guy, he's so overrated, bro. Like all he does is shoot threes, and then he's missing like 7 of them in a row. It's like, okay, maybe that's right. And that's all he does. He's a terrible defender. He doesn't really do much else.
Hmm.
And I think that's more aligned with the general view of Duncan Robinson, is that he's just somewhat of a limited player. But you and I know that his shooting helped unlock this team. Like the fact that he could start alongside Jimmy Butler when the stakes were so much higher. It's like we've got the superstar now in Jimmy. We want to maximize what this team can do. We've got Goran, who's already a sieve defensively at that stage in his career. And yet they were still like, you know what? We still got to have ourselves some Duncan Robinson. And he was a starter that first year in 2019. And I think that speaks so highly to how impressive he was as a shooter and
Yeah.
what he did to help unlock the offense. So
He was really
yeah,
important in terms of a fit next to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, because with those two guys as your
yes,
top two players, you need spacing. And for a few years there, Duncan Robinson, there wasn't anybody better outside of Steph
oh,
Curry at shooting threes. And
yeah.
that was a really big deal. And he had the
Might have been
gravity. There
Klay
was movement shooting.
Thompson and him kind of neck and
Yeah,
neck.
definitely. Yeah, in terms of the shooting percentages, and the volume, absolutely. Now,
Yeah,
again, I'll point to our rankings here. It's not just you and I that ranked him this high. Our panel ranked him really high. So I do think that there is a niche fan, because the niche fan tends to be the people that vote on these kinds of things when we do them.
absolutely,
But you
absolutely.
know what? I care more about the niche fan than the casual anyway. And even with like somebody like my dad, like he likes Duncan Robinson. He's not listening to Duncan's
No,
podcast or listening to the post game interviews in full or anything like that. But
I
let's move
get
on
it.
to trivia.
Let's see what we got here. In a media day interview with us back in 2022, Duncan
Oh, geez.
Robinson mentioned what
I
pizza
better know
place was
this.
his favorite
Oh,
in
Miami
Miami.
Slice. Yeah.
Ah,
Miami
a
Slice.
bonus point if you can name his favorite taco place.
He said that in our interview.
He did.
I'll just guess. I'll say Koyo.
Oh, he did mention that place, I think, but he said taco stand is
Ah,
his
right.
go-to place. And that profile by Shelburne in 2020 that I referenced earlier, she wrote that Duncan still drove the same car he had in college. What car was it?
Yeah, it was it in a pickup? It was a pickup, right? Am I wrong?
Mm-mm. I can't tell you that.
I don't know. The pickup truck, that's my guess.
It was a Jeep.
I was close. That was close. All right.
All right, here's a good one.
Okay.
Where does Duncan Robinson rank on the franchise's all-time list of free throw percentage? Not three-point shooting, but free throw percentage.
Second.
Good guess. It's actually third. Tied with
Tyler
Tyler
Hero's in front of
Hero.
him. Okay.
No, he's tied with Tyler. Tyler
Really?
might eclipse him. Yeah, 87.4%.
Who's in front of him?
Ray Allen is first at
Oh, yeah.
89.4. Stupid. And Jay Will 88.3%. I had
Wow.
no idea. I did not remember him being an 89% free throw shooter.
And what was Duncan's
with his-
percentage?
Just 87.4. So just a shade under
87.4.
that.
All right.
I mean, still
1
pretty
point
damn
for me
good.
then. 1
Yeah.
point for Milos. Okay. Recurring segments. This is our sliding doors moment. A what if
What a
moment that
deep
could have
cut
changed the way.
Seinfeld reference there.
Okay. Do you want to really
What?
know why? So the wife and I are rewatching Seinfeld, and then
Alright.
she's also rewatching Grey's Anatomy right now. And the
Okay.
actor who plays Milos shows up in an episode of Grey's Anatomy as a patient. And so Milos has been on the mind.
Okay. And it would take somebody like me to know, hey, 1 point for Milos. I know exactly what you're talking about. Jerry's throwing the game on purpose. Yeah,
Top five. I know. Can we take it easy on the insults, Milos? Top 5 Seinfeld episodes maybe coming up next on Locked Off Heat. I don't even think I could do it. I don't think I could do it. That's harder than top 5 Heat players. Sliding doors moment or what if moment. This is what I came up with. And I actually, it depends on how you define the what if moment. You could either say that there's a ton for Duncan, maybe there's not at all. To me, I came down to this one. What if the Knicks had signed Duncan when he was a restricted free agent in 2021? They had $50 million in cap space, and there was reports out of New York that there was people within the Knicks organization that thought that they should pursue him. What if they just used the cap space, signed Duncan Robinson? He doesn't get the $98 million contract from Miami. They did bring back Max Strus that year. Strus ends up outplaying Duncan Robinson at the end of that season. But then again, like you're not able to toggle between Strus and Duncan Robinson. I think we probably think about Max Strus a little bit differently at that point, because obviously he's under the microscope the way that Duncan was under the microscope. Who knows how he performs in that way, right? That's sort of a butterfly effect type of thing.
Yeah.
That's the what if moment that I have, though.
Wow, that's huge, because that changes everything. I mean, he kind of leaves here on a pretty high note, I think, at that stage.
Very high
It's like,
note, right?
wow,
He's the one that got away.
yeah. Wow. It's like, wow, we love that guy. He worked his butt off to get to this point, and he still kind of, I think, would be held in that idea of symbolic of the team's development, the player development, like taking an undrafted player and being able to mold them into something great. And I think that would be the lasting memory. Leaving on a high note, another Seinfeld
Yep.
reference there, like he would have just left at that point in time and everybody would be like, wow, it was great having Duncan. Instead, the contract changed
And
everything.
you know what else
Like
would have happened too? It would have been like if the Heat never won a championship, Heat fans would point to the fact that they let Duncan Robinson go.
We needed Duncan's 3-point shooting out there.
Yeah.
Instead, you saw him kind of struggle after signing the contract, and that changed everything. Like there were people who loved Duncan, and then they saw him as a total waste of money. How many episodes did we get talking about why Duncan was such an albatross and needed to find a way to trade him? Like he was such a very frequent topic. Even fans that we would meet on the street and during our watch parties, they would always talk about it. And it's so unfortunate that a guy who had been held in such high regard would have a fan base kind of turn against him because of the contract.
Is he jersey worthy?
I'll never forget Robinson 55, but no, I don't know that he is at this point. No. 10 years from now, absolutely.
I'm going yes.
Okay.
55 is a cool number.
Yes.
That's a cool number.
You know something? I was just to piggyback on that. I saw somebody at the gym in a mirrored reflection, and in my head, again, because I'm not listening to earphones and I'm just being like a maniac, I see 5'5" in the reflection, and I was like, oh man, a Robinson fan, all right. And I was so disappointed he was wearing a Jimmy Butler jersey that had 22 on it. I felt like slapping him after that. Like I was
the mirror flipped it. That's funny.
Yeah, the mirror flipped it. I saw 5'5". I was like, right on. Somebody giving Duncan his flowers. And I was like,
see,
Jimmy Butler,
that's the
casual.
That emotional response is why he's jersey worthy. This is a cool jersey.
I get it. Fine,
there it is.
Flipped it.
Does he pass the Jones Battier test? Yes, right. I mean, you just add him and his 3-point shooting back to this roster. Yeah, why not? Of course.
But he was on this roster, they didn't.
And they had to let him go because they had to get under the cap.
I suppose.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yes. At his Heat peak too. That's a good point. Like if he's shooting that percentage, he's playing over Pella. He's playing over.
Is he?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. I really don't, because I see Spo so enamored. And again, you pointed it out when talking about Pella yesterday. Like he's just so enamored with all of the little things that Duncan just wasn't capable of doing. That I think that Larson might still get the nod.
He's better than Simone Fontecchio
as a shooter. Absolutely.
Yeah,
one of the best in NBA history, undoubtedly.
So if you just had him on the roster, I think it would be helpful.
Maybe it would be an interesting test subject.
Versus pin this player against a player who came before him. Ask if we got it right, having Duncan Robinson over Hassan Whiteside. Yeah, no brainer. We had this one right.
For us, I mean, somebody seems to think so if they have him ranked 24th. I don't know if it's the same person that had Hassan ranked highly, but I mean, look, they're both kind of similar. Like they both flourished, and then contracts changed the way that players or fans perceived their impact in the course of a game. And they were both limited in their own ways. Hassan limited in what he could do, just basically a shot blocker and an occasional scorer and rebounder. But, he had holes in his game. Duncan, one of the best shooters in NBA history, but there wasn't much else that he was capable of doing. And so I think it kind of changes. Like you almost have a higher regard for like an all-around player, glue guy like Shane Battier than you do for a limited one-dimensional player like Whiteside or Robinson.
So interestingly enough, if I just filter it out for just the fan vote, taking our vote out of it, the average, like the aggregate vote from the fans from our panel here has Duncan at 18.25.
Yeah.
They have Max Strus right behind him at 18.33.
Which is ridiculous.
You and I, our votes moved Duncan up and moved Strus down.
Yes.
Quite a bit, where Strus was 25 and Duncan was 13. Wow. So I do think our listeners probably disagree with us a little bit, even though they do have him on this list. But like I said, like there's some people who have him clearly in the top 15, and the next voters have him kind of at the fringe of this entire list, right? So it really does it matters more, I guess, of what seasons you're thinking about when you're thinking about Duncan Robinson. Let us know what you think in the YouTube comments. Did we get it right with Duncan Robinson? Did you guys get it right with Duncan Robinson? What do you think about when you think about Duncan Robinson's tenure in Miami? And let us know what other Locked Off Heat questions you want to ask. Do you want us to rank Seinfeld episodes? Do you want to hear David's rankings of Fish albums? Let us know in the comments. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day.